I'm going to hand you over to our party chairman, Mr. Nick Griffin, MEP for the North West. Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
So, just fairly briefly, I thought I'd talk today about just a few of the issues that have been raised on the doorsteps today as I've been going around and some of the others. And it's quite remarkable. Obviously, we're known as the anti-immigration party, the people who spoke out about grooming, the people who speak out about the Islamic problem. We're known about that. But when it comes down to voting, really people's concerns, the reason they want to pick a local councillor, it's much more prosaic than that. So I want to look at 3 or 4 of the things that people have talked to me about on the doors today and our response to them, because these are the problems of ordinary, decent people, not of people with deep political views. It's just what ordinary people have problems in their lives. One lady was telling me earlier on about problem around here. My big problem, she said, is the kids, the lads are out there and making noise all the time. They're kicking the football against my garage door, all the rest of it. It's quite minor, but it's making her life miserable. So what we do about it? Well, at one level, we simply say, little criminal scumbags are criminal scumbags who ruin people's lives because they can get away with it. They had no discipline in schools. They need discipline in schools, and they need corporal punishment, not a long police record, which means they can never get a decent job in their lives. They need a quick whap with a cane, like they used to have on the Isle of Man. Isle of Man, when they used to cane people, 0 minor crime. Now it's been done away with, thanks to the European Union, as much minor crime as almost anywhere in the United Kingdom. So it'd work. A short, sharp shot would work. But you can read that in the Daily Mail, in the Express and all the rest of it. There's actually more to it than that. And we as a party, we're not a Daily Mail party, we're not an Express party. We in many ways are the Labour Party that there used to be 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. We're here for ordinary people. And those lads, and it is mainly lads rather than girls, they're ordinary people of our stock as well. There's no point just blaming them and saying we're going to beat the little bastards. Some of them need that, but you've also got to look, why do they do it? Why is it that young lads think that it's funny or it's big or whatever to persecute old ladies? Why do they need to do it? And you look at the statistics in Burnley, and if you look, how many young lads have actually got a decent job? Because young men especially, young men are programmed to want to show that they're men. That's just all human societies all over the world have a rite of passage, something where a boy becomes a man. And every society has a rite of passage. And Burnley used to have a rite of passage for when young boys became men. And it was when they went and they followed their dad or their uncle or their older brother, and they went and did a proper day's work, somewhere hard work, serious work, decent, honest work that people look up to, and they were able to do an honest day's work and then do a week of it and bring home their first pay packet to their parents and their family and the girls, all the rest of it. And they became a man in a place like Burnley, in a working class place, because they were working class jobs, decent jobs for ordinary people. What have they got now? 2 days a week down in college to keep them off the dole queue, Asda if they're lucky. But no serious job, which makes him think and his parents understand and the other lads and the girls think, yeah, he's a man now. There's absolutely nothing. So of course, they're going to, instead of that, they're going to make up their own rites of passage. And that's causing so much trouble, you get an ASBO. And the Tories and so on, they think, oh, you give them ASBOs, that'll sort it out. No, it doesn't. It's like a bloody great badge. Yeah. I've got an ASBO now. And all the little kids, they want an ASBO. So they've taken away from working class communities all over Britain. They've taken away their heart, their backbone, their pride, and they've left them with short-term jobs, useless jobs, pathetic jobs, low-paid jobs, jobs which don't give anyone any self-respect if they can get a job at all. And then they wonder why lads misbehave. And if you really want to stop lads misbehaving, it's not just enough to say, if you go wrong, we're going to whack you. You've got to give lads back and communities back a sense of pride and a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. And we're never going to get that in Britain while you've got Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, UKIP, all of them absolutely convinced that if something can be made cheaper in the world than we can in Britain, we shouldn't make it in Britain. Which is a recipe, it's a way of saying we're not going to bother to make anything. Because the Chinese, who still, after years of their wages going up, they still work for about a tenth of what we work for, they can always undercut the people of Britain. And unless you've got a government which says, right, we're going to say to the police service, to the ambulance service, to the fire brigade and all the rest of it, you buy British vehicles, British-made vehicles. Until you've got a government which says that, then they're going to be buying Volvos or Datsuns or whatever, instead of British cars, British ambulances, British trucks, with the result there's no serious British car industry. As a matter of fact, Britain's got a bit of a car industry. I was in Germany passing through the other day, or a few days ago, bit of a holiday, and looking around, strange, so many Mini Coopers all over the place. Oh, that's rather good. It's a British car. I looked it up. No, it's not. It's owned by BMW. But they're made in Cowley, they're made in Oxford, they're made by British workers, and under decent management, it's a world beater. But the whole of the British car industry is now owned by foreigners. It's not the fault of the British workers. The British workers in car factories now are turning out first-class products. That's why German companies are buying them up. It's why Chinese companies are buying them up. And they're making British products in Britain with British workers. But they're not really British because all the profit's going abroad. What kind of madness is that? So the British National Party would say we're going to rebuild British industry. One, because we need to, because we need the money. Because if you don't have industry churning out things that the world wants to buy, then you can't afford to import goods. You can't even afford to import food. And the country's in a serious problem. You certainly can't afford to pay for a health service, to pay for the things that the civilised society actually needs. So we need manufacturing industry for the economy, a matter of money. But we also need manufacturing industry as a matter of social cohesion and pride, so that you don't have kids growing up bored and with nothing to do, with no purpose in their lives, basically on the scrap heap. Because if society treats a young lad as though he's a piece of shit, he's going to behave like a piece of shit. Sorry to be crude, but it's as simple as that. You've got to give them the chance to do something really worthwhile, to really get on in their lives, and then, if they turn their back on it, if they spit on society, if they harass old ladies, then you've got the right and the duty as a state to whack the living hell out of them, to make them behave, but not just to say to them, you're nothing, and then be surprised when they misbehave. As far as we're concerned, even in fact, the ones who've most misbehaved, they're the ones that most should interest a party which is going to try and build society back together again. Because the ones who've misbehaved the worst, the gang leaders, they're the natural leaders. They're the ones who had a little bit of extra spark. It's what made them the ones that the other lads want to follow. They're the ones who actually need a bloody good thrashing, and then they need to be put on a course whereby they're going to be trained into a foreman as we start rebuilding British industry. Because they're the ones that spark, the ones with the fire. And the very ones who are the brightest and the sharpest in a society where there's no way out for working class lads, they're going to tend to be the worst. Because they're the ones who've got that extra bit to offer, and they're the ones who are being most neglected. And we need to get those kids, we need to turn them round and to turn them into the local leaders, into the foremen, into the people whose work and brains and intellect and drive is going to make Britain a better place. So, that's the first thing, antisocial behaviour. Second thing, and perhaps connected with that, chap was saying to me, there's a real big problem around here with the playing fields being sold off. And the government and all the nanny state people are all saying, too many Brits are overweight. Yeah, of course we are, and so on. But too many kids are overweight, and so on, and they shouldn't be. They need more exercise. And yet, if they all pay lip service to that, but then they turn around and they say, schools can't have... There was a case the other day that there was a primary school where, it was in the papers, a primary school which was having a sports day, but there was dew on the grass, so they had to cancel the sports day because it was a health and safety risk, because the kids might slip over. So what craziness is that? But at least that school had a playing field still, because vast numbers of playing fields around this country have been sold off and are being sold off. And now, 8-9 years ago, it was the Labour Party in government selling off playing fields, and the Tories were saying, this is a disgrace, this has got to stop, and we promised to stop it. But of course, now the Tories are in power, they're still selling off the playing fields, and the Labour Party is saying, They shouldn't be selling off the playing fields. They all sell off the playing fields. When it comes to election times, they say we're going to stop it, but they carry on doing it. And here in Lancashire, this chap was telling me, well, specifically Burnley, saying, lock your avenue, playing fields there. They're looking to sell them off and build houses there. Now, some parts of Britain need more houses for local British people. There's many areas where there's significant numbers of our people living homeless, sleeping rough, sleeping on their parents' floors or whatever, and it's wrong. People are entitled to a decent house. But there'd be a damn sight more houses to go around in this country if so many of them weren't taken up with people who come from other parts of the world where they've left perfectly good houses. A Brit who's homeless is homeless because there isn't a home. A Pole or a Somali who's homeless in Britain is homeless because they've left their home in Poland and Somalia and they've come here. And they shouldn't be coming here to take our homes because it's not fair on our own people. It's as simple as that. And under this party they wouldn't. These people couldn't just walk in and not just go to the back of the queue, but actually be put to the front of the housing queue. That's the madness of it. You know why? Because in the old days, to be on the housing queue, it was a queue. Because that's what we Brits do, isn't it? See a queue, you join it. It's a natural British thing, and you know how to stand in a line. I work, as you know, I'm sure, in Brussels, and you see all these supposedly civilised MEPs and their assistants, and they've got no concept of a queue, honestly. When they're trying to get to the bar incidentally where you're allowed to smoke, which I find absolutely sickening, considering thousands of pubs in Britain have been closed down because there's an EU law, that's where it came from, which says you can't smoke in a pub. So we can't smoke anywhere in a pub. I don't smoke, but nevertheless, people are entitled to smoke. If a landlord wants smoking in a pub, that's his choice. It's his home. It's as simple as that. It's not for people to interfere. But the people who interfered, the European Union, oh yes, we've got nice posh bars where people can sit and smoke. I tried to take a camera in a few months back. They went absolutely ape about it. You're not allowed to do that. Oh no, you can't do that. You're not allowed to. But anyway, those people passed these waves and waves of laws, and part of it is the fact that the British government can no longer control our own borders, so these people are pouring into this country, so there's not the homes. So then they say, we've got to sell off the houses for housing. We've got to sell off the playing fields for housing. It's not really the case, is it? Because like I said, if they wanted to house our people, they could keep the foreigners out. No, they want to sell off playing fields for housing because there's lots of money. There's lots of money out front and there's lots of money back pocket. That's what it is. Everywhere you look at local government, Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, whatever, they're actually there not for the salary up front so much as what they can get on all the subcommittees and what they can get in graft and corruption. And there's no graft and corruption if you're not selling things off. So selling off playing fields makes money. So Lancashire County Council now, Labour, is busy selling off playing fields in Burnley and all over Lancashire. And this is the party that's supposed to stand up for working people, completely forgetting the fact that most of those playing fields were actually bought and paid for by the hard work of local communities and people running raffles and jumble sales and all sorts decades and decades and decades ago. It doesn't belong to the council. It belongs to us. It belongs to you. It belongs to ordinary people, that land. The same as hospitals in most parts in this country. The hospitals, the schools, the playing fields, almost all our public assets, our public wealth, at one stage was money they were produced by money raised or money left by local people to serve their local community. And it certainly was never intended for the Labour Party or the Tory Party just to come along, sell it off and steal, literally steal the money into their back pockets. But that's what they're doing. So here in Burnley, you've got to blame particularly Lancashire County Council because it's their issues. One other thing they're doing, another chap told me, about how they're knocking, the council are buying up terraced houses and knocking two into one for larger families. In Burnley, they're doing the same in Blackburn, in Preston. Who has the larger families? It's not us, is it? No, that means taking our communities' houses and turning them into houses for their community. That's what's going on there, without so much as a buy you leave for ordinary people. One more thing about playing fields and so on, the big picture. Like I say, in Lancashire, you blame the Labour Party at council level for selling off playing fields, for selling off our heritage. But at national level, the fact that virtually nobody knows, it's one of the great scandals of this Tory government. More than half of the secondary schools in England and Wales, lock, stock and barrel, the buildings, the car parks, the playing fields, they've given them to big private businesses. Not sold them, like the Labour Party is planning to do with the Lockyer Avenue fields. Not sold them. The Tory government has given more than half of our secondary schools to big businesses. Did you know that? No. It's incredible, even more so, because when you look at the list of who's had most of them, the big businesses who've received literally billions of very valuable development land, which is what we're talking about, given by the Tory government, the ones who receive the most are companies who've donated money to the Tory party. Now, there was all that fuss about MPs putting in moats and duck houses and so on their expenses. Yeah, absolutely wrong. 10,000 quid here, 15,000 quid there. But it's chicken feed compared with the billions that these bastards are giving away of our national assets and wealth, and they're giving them to people who donate money to the Tory party. That really is an absolute disgrace. So we need an answer for it. Well, the answer, quite simply, is that playing fields and schools which were created, bought, endowed by local communities belong to the local community, and unless there's no kids there anymore, they must stay in the ownership of the local community for the benefit of the local community. And anyone, whatever political party they're in, who one way or another sells them off, gives them away to their mates in big business, belongs not in government but in prison. And that's what we're going to do. And it's one reason they hate us so much, because we're the only ones who talk about it, we're the only ones who put it in front of ordinary people, and we're the only ones who get it and join the dots and say, this isn't a form of government, it's a form of corruption, and it needs dealing with. We need to bring back honesty into British politics, and part of honesty is ensuring that the assets that belong to our community stay with our community. So that was another issue which came up. Actually, what appears to be a local problem is in fact something of a far, far bigger issue which you can't deal with just by protesting about it locally. It's a start, but you've actually got to turn it round and say, yeah, this isn't a problem that's just happened. It's happened because we've got a ruling system which is run by political parties who aren't there for ordinary people. They're there for themselves and for big business. Until you change that, don't be surprised if you have sharks running the show. Don't be surprised when you get bitten. You've got not to complain about the bite, you've got to get rid of the shark. And that's what we're here to do, to give people a chance to get rid of the sharks. The other big one that I know has come up time and time and time again is, well, on our sheet we were taking round, this is based on what people have come up with as local problems. So we got council cost cutting, future use of playing fields, and another one I know comes up a lot, bedroom tax. So here we're really talking about, you can roll it under a blanket of council cuts. That every town, city, village in Britain, ordinary people are being hit one way or another, and many, many ways, by more and more council cuts. And you've got particularly the bedroom tax and the cuts in people's welfare if they're on benefits, and especially you're disabled and so on. So what's going on here? Well, someone raised this, what I thought was an acronym, ATOS. And I've heard it described as another Tory-operated scam. It's actually two companies whose job is to force disabled people off benefits and back to work. When in fact, people are disabled and on benefits for one or two reasons. Either because they genuinely are sick and they really can't work, or because they actually would quite like to work, but the jobs are so low paid that they're better off on benefits. So really you can't blame people for scratching their heads and thinking, well, should I really go and work 37.5 hours a week to be 40, 50 quid a week worse off? You know, what are people supposed to be, saints or something? What absolute nonsense. Why are wages so low? Because profits are quite high in corporate big business in Britain. They don't pay taxes, there's a different story. Wages are so low because for decades we've had government after government after government bringing in as many foreigners as they can possibly get away with in order to depress wages. That's what it's about, mass immigration. It's a way of making money for big business, and it's a way of debasing the value of British workers so they can't organise, so they can't get a decent wage. That's what mass immigration, that's its purpose and it's its main effect. So because they've so far driven wages down, there's lots of people who actually could work. But they're not going to work because they're worse off, so much worse off. So unless they're forced to work at even lower wages, they're not going to. And some years ago when they brought in the minimum wage, to start with it was a minimum wage. It was actually quite a good thing. It did cut out sweatshop unemployment. But it's not a minimum wage anymore. It's the maximum wage in most areas. It's the most you're possibly going to get. So they can only force people back to work if they're driving that down to the very possible lowest. So people have got to be forced to go to work for less than they could get by being on the dole. And that's being done by this ATOS, another Tory-operated scam. No, it's actually apparently two companies been put together whose job is to enforce this. It's the government enforcing it. It's local councils enforcing it. But by putting up a front of private companies, the private companies make money, but when they're so disgraced, they're the ones getting the blame. Shouldn't be private companies get the blame. This is the government doing it. And here in Burnley, it's Labour councillors and Lib Dem councillors, but particularly Labour, who are pushing this thing through. They're the ones to blame. The bedroom tax affects huge numbers of people as well, obviously. I'm sure you know about it. Everybody does. Now, yeah, if there were enough jobs to go around, people should have to work. Why should someone, if there's a decent job and a decent wage and they won't take it, why should they be entitled to sit on their backside at the expense of people who pay taxes? If there was enough jobs. But there's not enough jobs, so it's unfair to penalise ordinary people. As for housing, they say, well, there's too many older families clogging up the housing market. No, the house is their home. And when they say that people have got to be forced out of their home so that there's enough houses to go around, again, it was immigration which has caused the problem in the first place. But think about how unfair that is on so many different groups of people. On, for instance, a couple who divorced. So they've each got two houses and the kids stay sometimes in one place or sometimes in the other, but they're both going to have to pay extra money because they've got to keep a house spare for the kids. Or grandparents whose kids have left home, had their own kids, and they're told you don't need three bedrooms because there's only the couple. You can move to a one-bedroom house. Where are the grandkids going to go when they come to stay? Or families, there was something in the paper the other day demonising a white working class family because with 14 kids, they were saying we can't live any longer in a two-bedroom house. Well, of course they can't. And they demonise them at the same time as saying we've got to bring in all these immigrants because otherwise who's going to work and pay taxes and pay your pensions in 20 years' time? Bloody right. As a matter of fact, a working class family who have 6 or 7 kids, they're not sponges. They're the people who are putting themselves out to produce the next generation of Brits who are needed to pay the taxes of every single person watching this speech or this video. But certainly the Daily Mail finds it convenient to demonise these people. And that's what they're doing. Poor people in Britain are being demonised and being screwed for why? Because you're actually talking about 10 quid here, 14 quid a week is the average loss that people on benefits are suffering per room for the bedroom tax. And they're saying we've got to get this money because we've got to bring this money in because the economy's busted. Why is the economy busted? Not because of ordinary working people, whether they work, whether they're unemployed for no fault of their own, or even if they're sponges. The economy's busted because of the banks. Because the government, the Tory government, the Thatcher government, removed almost all the restrictions on the banks and just allowed them to go in and make as much money in every single possible way they could think of. They basically took a fox and they said, here's a hen coop, and they opened the door and they shoved the fox in the hen coop and they shut the door behind it. Because banking is organised fraud on a massive, massive scale. And they let the banksters loose, and the banksters destroyed their own banks in many cases, And as a result, we're now billions and billions and billions of pounds in debt. The rough estimate probably at present is that the bankers' bust has cost the British people £500 billion. You know what their cuts are supposed to save each year? 6 billion. So it's nearly 100 times. So they'd have to cut 100 times more before they even made up for what they paid to bail out the banks. That's the true level of this thing. It's absolutely disgusting, isn't it? That ordinary people are made scapegoats for such an enormous fraud by the ruling elite. And then, to cap it all off, and one more thing which was raised to me today, actually a national political issue, when a chap said, he's saying, oh, bloody foreign aid, because he'd read the other day about how Britain, which is a bankrupt state, is giving Nigeria £300 million a year, and Nigeria is now operating a space programme. Unbelievable. The country which is the fraud capital of the world, they're now also planning to send fraudsters into space. Fairly pointless. They may not know there's no one up there to defraud. It's not like being a Nigerian and coming to London. There's no one up there to rip off. Don't know what they're going to do once they get up there. Rip each other off, I suppose. There's nothing else for them to do. But seriously, what the hell is the British government doing, saying £300 million out of your pocket and your pocket and your pocket, 300 million quid for us to give it to the Nigerian elite to spend on whatever the Nigerian elite spend their money on? Which I tell you what, is not poor people in Nigeria. Oh no, it's on themselves, on their own Swiss bank accounts and all the rest of it. And on some farcical Nigerian space race. Quite unbelievable. And the Tory government, they proudly say they've now ring-fenced, this year it's 12 billion, it's going to be 14 billion pounds a year in foreign aid. And all the cuts they've imposed on Burnley, every family who they send to sleep night after night after night, desperately worried about losing their home, or about losing one of their family members losing their welfare benefits. Every family they've screwed in Burnley and in Lancashire, in Britain, every library they've cut, everything they've sold off, every single Tory cut in a year has clawed back about £6 billion. And then Cameron goes along and says, I've ring-fenced £12 billion in foreign aid. We're not going to touch it. We're going to keep on giving that. So if they impose twice the misery they've already imposed on the people of Burnley, on the people of Britain, they'd still only just cover this year's foreign aid budget. What an absolute disgrace is that. And again, it's a sign of why we need the British National Party, because we're the only ones who are plain enough and blunt enough to say we're actually very sorry that there's poverty in the third world. Not least because it means that the escape route for many of those people is to come to Britain. And yes, something should be done about poverty in the third world by the governments of the third world and by the community of the world coming together and stopping the banks screwing every single country in the world, because then most of those countries would have enough money to stand on their own 2 feet if they stopped their ruling elite robbing them. That'd be okay. So we're actually quite sympathetic to the poor of the third world, and we'd like to see their plight sorted out. But it's not our job. It's not the job of a British government. It's not the job of the British people to sort out the problems of the rest of the world, either by giving them money or by going in and bombing them flat. It's not our job. The job of a British government is to look after the British people. It's to run Britain for the British people. And we're persecuted and we're demonised simply for saying that, because it's so politically incorrect to say, I repeat, that the job of any government is to look after its own people. It's to put its own people first, which translates for us as, this is Britain, Britain should be for the British, and the British government should put, and under the British National Party will put, Britain and the British first. Thank you.